The night air crackled with anticipation as a magnificent mansion glowed under the moonlit sky. One by one, sleek, expensive cars pulled up to the grand entrance, depositing the city's most powerful figures. Inside, the air hummed with hushed conversations and the clinking of champagne glasses. At the center of it all stood Victor Walker, a millionaire CEO with an empire at his fingertips. He raised his glass, his voice booming across the opulent hall. "My dear friends," he announced, a proud smile on his face, "tonight, my son will choose his bride from one of your esteemed families." A wave of applause erupted. Cameras flashed, and reporters scribbled furiously. But hidden just beyond the velvet curtains, in the quiet shadows of a side hallway, someone else was listening. That someone was Lena Brooks, a maid, silently polishing a silver tray. The CEO's announcement hit her like a physical blow. She froze, her hand hovering in midair. She knew the CEO's son, Caleb. He was kind, not like the others. But she never imagined this, a forced marriage. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she pressed herself flat against the cool wall, praying not to be seen. She mouthed the words, a knot of dread tightening in her stomach. "So, he's choosing a bride tonight." Upstairs, in a lavishly decorated room, Caleb Bennett stared at his reflection. He adjusted the collar of his perfectly tailored suit, but his expression was anything but celebratory. His best friend, Owen Hayes, leaned against the doorframe, a playful smirk on his face. "Bro, you do realize half the city is downstairs, holding their breath for you, right?" Caleb let out a heavy sigh, his shoulders slumping. "I don't want a bride chosen for her family's status," he muttered, his voice low and frustrated. Owen just shrugged, knowing the futility of arguing. "You know your dad, he won't listen to a word you say." Caleb's jaw clenched, a flicker of defiance in his eyes. "Then I'll have to find my own way." Downstairs, the grand doors swung open again, revealing a procession of the city's top socialites. They glided into the room in a shimmering wave of designer gowns and sparkling jewels, each one a picture of grace and ambition. A murmur of admiration rippled through the crowd. Victor Walker beamed with pride, his plan unfolding perfectly. Just then, Caleb began his descent down the grand staircase. Instantly, all eyes shifted to him. The young women straightened their postures, their smiles becoming brighter, each one vying for his attention, ready to charm the heir to the Walker fortune. Caleb offered a slight, formal bow to the assembled guests, his face an unreadable mask. His father, Victor, gestured for him to come and stand by his side. Tonight, Victor's voice boomed once more, filled with authority. "My son chooses his future." Hidden behind a marble pillar, Lena watched the scene unfold. She saw Caleb's eyes sweep across the room, over the sea of hopeful, smiling faces. But he didn't look excited or powerful. He looked trapped. He looked profoundly sad. Suddenly, the polished calm of the party shattered. A server, weaving through the dense crowd with a tray of drinks, stumbled. Glasses crashed to the floor, the sound echoing through the now silent hall. Guests gasped and jumped back, annoyed at the disruption. But before anyone else could react, Lena rushed forward. Her training, her instinct to help, took over completely. She didn't think, she just moved. And in that moment of chaos, Caleb saw her. For the first time all night, a genuine, warm smile touched his lips. Lena knelt, her focus entirely on carefully picking up the sharp, glittering shards of glass. A shadow fell over her, and a soft voice said, "Careful." She looked up to see Caleb standing over her. The guests stared, their whispers turning from annoyance to shock. The heir, Caleb Bennett, was speaking to a maid. On the floor, Lena quickly dropped her gaze, her cheeks flushing with embarrassment. "I'm sorry, sir," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Across the room, Victor's face hardened into a mask of pure fury. He did not like what he was seeing one bit. With a sharp gesture, Victor summoned Caleb to his side. His voice a low, angry hiss. "What in the world are you doing?" Caleb's reply was calm, almost too calm. "I'm helping someone." Victor scoffed, his eyes flashing with contempt. "She's a maid." Caleb's own eyes sharpened, a cold glint appearing in them. "She's a human being first." The tension between father and son was a tangible thing, a crack in the perfect facade of the evening. The socialites watched the exchange, their expressions a mixture of confusion and burgeoning jealousy. Why would he pay any attention to a servant? Lena quickly gathered the last of the glass and retreated to a quiet corner, trying to make herself invisible. But she couldn't stop her eyes from drifting back to Caleb. Her mind flashed back to a month ago, when she'd fainted from exhaustion in the West Wing. It was Caleb who had found her, who had helped her, who had made sure she was okay. He was different from the arrogant, entitled, rich people she served every day. He was gentle, but she knew her place. She was a maid, and he was an heir. "Don't get attached," she silently scolded herself. But it was too late. She already was. Just then, a stunning socialite named Bianca Pierce, known for her beauty and her ambition, approached Caleb. She leaned in close, her voice a sultry purr as she attempted to flirt. Caleb responded with polite nods and brief, courteous answers, but his disinterest was obvious. His gaze kept drifting across the room, back to the corner where Lena was trying to disappear into the wallpaper. Bianca followed his line of sight and her smile faltered, replaced by a deep frown. She turned to another girl, her voice a sharp whisper. Why is he looking at her asterisk? The seeds of jealousy had been sown. Victor, sensing he was losing control, decided to force the issue. He stepped forward, clapping his hands for attention. The time has come. Caleb, choose your bride, he announced, his voice filled with a forced, proud resonance. The line of elite young women stood taller, their hearts pounding. Cameras were raised. Reporters leaned in, pens poised. The entire room held its breath. Caleb looked at the beautiful, expectant faces before him. But then, his gaze slowly, deliberately, drifted past them. He looked toward the back of the hall, directly at the corner where Lena was standing. She froze, her eyes widening in disbelief and panic. Her heart felt like it was going to beat its way out of her chest. No, she whispered to the empty air. No, don't look at me. Please don't look at me. But Caleb's gaze remained locked on hers, intense and unwavering. Victor saw it. He saw where his son was looking, and his face contorted in a mask of pure rage. In a flash of fury, Victor lunged forward and grabbed Caleb's wrist, his grip like iron. Choose one of them. Choose a socialite. Now, he demanded, through gritted teeth. With a sharp tug, Caleb pulled his hand free. His voice rang out, clear and firm, cutting through the stunned silence of the room. I already have. Victor's face went pale. A collective gasp swept through the crowd. Everyone watched, mesmerized, as Caleb took a step forward. They all expected him to walk toward Bianca or one of the other beautiful heiresses, but he didn't. He turned, and he took a single deliberate step toward the maid. The music dies down, and the entire hall falls into a hushed silence. Every eye is fixed on one person, Caleb, as he takes deliberate steps toward the young maid. Lena, terrified. Lena lowers her gaze, her world shrinking to the polished floor beneath her feet. Across the room, I can see Victor, Caleb's father, his jaw tightening with rage. Bianca Pierce, the woman Caleb is supposed to be with, stands frozen, her mouth agape in disbelief. A wave of whispers ripples through the wealthy guests, the air thick with scandal and anticipation. Caleb stops directly in front of Lena. She's trembling, unable to meet his eyes, feeling the weight of hundreds of stares. Lena, he says, his voice a soft, gentle murmur amidst the chaos. She can only manage a choked whisper. Please, don't do this. But Caleb's response is firm, meant for everyone to hear. You deserve to be seen. In an instant, the room erupts in a blinding storm of camera flashes, capturing the moment that will surely be on the cover of every society magazine tomorrow. Just as the photographers go wild, Victor storms forward, his voice booming through the hall. Caleb, step back from her. He tries to command his son, to regain control of this disastrous situation. But Caleb doesn't flinch. He straightens his shoulders, standing taller, and looks his father in the eye. No, Dad, the defiance is clear. Victor's glare could cut through steel. The guests lean in, hungry for the drama unfolding. This is better than any theater performance. Sensing her moment, Bianca Pierce's sharp voice cuts through the tension. Caleb, she's a maid. Her words are a weapon, designed to remind everyone of the social order. Murmurs of agreement spread through the crowd. They nod, they sneer. This is the moment Caleb turns, not to Lena, but to the entire assembly of judgmental faces. And she's the only one here who's real. The words hang in the air, a direct insult to every person in the room. Lena trembles, his declaration both a shield and a spotlight. Victor struggles to maintain his composure, to hide the fury boiling just beneath his polished exterior. But it's a losing battle. He's about to explode. With a monumental effort, Victor forces a smile, his voice strained but loud. Everyone, please, enjoy the dinner. Caleb and I just need to have a private talk. It's a desperate attempt to save face. He grabs Caleb's arm, his grip like iron, intending to drag him away. But Caleb pulls back, his movements calm and deliberate, refusing to be manhandled. Victor's fury shifts to Lena. Lena, go to your room, he orders, his tone dripping with ice. Without a second thought, Lena obeys. She turns and walks away, each step feeling heavier than the last, her heart shattering into a million pieces with every footfall. She disappears from the grand hall, leaving the storm to rage behind her. Victor wastes no time. He practically drags Caleb to his private office, the heavy oak door slamming shut with a resounding bang that echoes the finality of the moment. Have you lost your mind? Victor shouts, his voice raw with fury. The facade is gone. This is the real Victor, the ruthless patriarch. But Caleb is unbowed. I won't marry someone just because they're rich, he replies, his voice steady. Victor leans in close, his face a mask of cold pragmatism. Love doesn't matter in high society. It's about power, alliances, and legacy, not feelings. Caleb looks at his father, his expression turning to one of pure disgust. Dad, You're the one who taught me to respect people, to treat everyone with dignity. Now you want me to throw all that away." Caleb's voice is filled with disbelief. Victor scoffs, waving a dismissive hand. "Respect. She's a worker, a nobody. She serves us, she doesn't sit with us." The cruelty in his father's words makes Caleb's hands clench into tight fists at his sides. "She is more genuine and has more integrity than any socialite you paraded in front of me downstairs." Victor just shakes his head, as if talking to a foolish child. He plays his final card. "If you choose her, you lose your inheritance." "Every penny," Caleb freezes. The words hang between them, a thread of unimaginable weight. Victor sees his son's hesitation and presses his advantage, folding his arms in a gesture of absolute power. "The money or the maid? Choose." Caleb looks down, the conflict tearing him apart. Meanwhile, miles away from the wealth and power of that office, Lena cries silently in the stark, empty maid's quarters. The sound of her own quiet sobs is the only thing that fills the room. She sits on the cold floor, hugging her knees to her chest, her small body racked with guilt and sorrow. Why would he do that? She whispers to herself. Why would he humiliate himself and his family for her? She feels like a wrecking ball, destroying a life that was never hers to touch. The guilt is a heavy blanket, suffocating her. "I should leave," she decides, her voice barely audible. "I have to leave before things get even worse." With trembling hands, she pulls out her small, worn bag and begins to pack her few belongings. Then, she finds a piece of paper and a pen. She starts writing a resignation letter, her tears blotting the ink. Back in the suffocating tension of the office, Caleb finally lifts his head. His decision is made. He looks at his father, his eyes clear and resolute. "If my inheritance means losing myself, becoming someone I don't recognize." Victor waits, holding his breath, certain he has one. "Then keep it," Caleb says, his voice firm, unwavering. Victor stumbles back a step, utterly stunned. He never believed his son would actually do it. Without another word, Caleb turns and walks out of the office, his breaths coming in angry, shaking gasps. He has made his choice. He doesn't walk, he runs. Caleb rushes through the opulent mansion, his footsteps echoing in the suddenly empty hallways. He heads straight for the servants' quarters, his heart pounding in his chest. He throws open the door to Lena's room. She jumps, startled, her eyes red and swollen from crying. The half-packed bag and the letter on the small table tell him everything he needs to know. "Lena, don't leave," he says, his voice dangerously soft, laced with a plea he can't hold back. Wiping her tears with the back of her hand, she shakes her head. "You shouldn't ruin your life for me." Caleb crosses the room in 2 strides and kneels in front of her, taking her hands in his. "I'm not ruining my life," he says, his gaze intense, searching hers. "I'm choosing it. I'm choosing what my heart wants." For the first time, Lena is still shaking her head, pulling her hands away. "Your father hates me. This will never work." "I don't care," Caleb replies instantly. "But I care," Lena whispers, her voice breaking. Her gaze falls to the resignation letter on the table beside her. Caleb follows her eyes, and before she can react, he gently takes the letter from her hand. "This isn't happening," he says, his voice low and determined. He tears it in half, then in half again. Lena gasps, watching the pieces of her intended escape flutter to the floor. "You're staying," he says, his eyes locking with hers. "With me." Suddenly, the sound of slow, heavy footsteps echoes in the narrow hallway. They both freeze, turning toward the door. And there he is. Victor stands in the doorway, his face a thunderous mask of cold fury. He takes in the scene, his defiant son kneeling before the maid, the torn letter on the floor. His eyes, void of any warmth, settle on them. His voice is chillingly calm, promising a world of pain. "This ends now." Victor stood at the doorway, his face a mask of cold fury. I saw the look, and my first instinct was to move, to put myself between him and Lena. She flinched, her head dipping low as if to hide from his glare. My voice was low, pleading. "Dad, don't do this." But he wasn't listening to me. His finger shot out, pointing directly at Lena. The words he spoke were like ice. "She is fired. Pack and get out." Lena's hand started to tremble, a small, barely noticeable tremor that broke my heart. I couldn't believe it. My eyes widened in disbelief. "You can't fire her for nothing," I said, my own voice firmer now, laced with a protective edge I didn't know I had. He snapped back, his anger boiling over. "She made you disrespect your family." The accusation was so unfair, so wrong, that the truth just flew out of my mouth. "No, you made me." The words hung in the air, heavy and sharp. A dangerous, suffocating silence descended upon the small room, thick with unspoken resentment. He took a step closer, invading our space, his eyes boring into mine. "Caleb, you will apologize and end this nonsense." His tone was one of finality, an order, not a request, but I wouldn't bend. I just stood my ground, shaking my head slightly. That's when he made his move, his hand reaching out to grab Lena's arm. I reacted without thinking, pulling her behind me in one swift motion. shielding her with my body. Touch her again, I warned, my voice dropping to a low growl, and we will have a bigger problem. The threat was clear, and it stopped him in his tracks. He looked stunned, as if he was seeing a stranger, not his own son. Fine, he finally spat out, his voice dripping with venom. If she stays, then you leave my house. Lena gasped behind me, a sharp intake of breath filled with horror, but I didn't even blink. I met his gaze, my resolve hardening into steel. Then, I'll pack my things. He stared at me, completely thrown. He had expected me to fold, to choose his money and his name over her. He never expected such a solid, unwavering answer. He had lost this round, and he knew it. Without another word, he turned on his heel and stormed away. The sound of his angry footsteps echoed down the long hallway, each one a hammer blow against the silence. The moment he was gone, Lena's strength gave out. She collapsed onto the edge of the small bed, her body shaking with sobs. I was by her side in an instant, kneeling in front of her. Lena, please don't cry, I whispered, my voice thick with emotion. She just shook her head, tears streaming down her face. You shouldn't leave your home for me, she choked out between sobs. Gently, I reached up and wiped a tear from her cheek with my thumb. A home without love means nothing, I said softly, hoping she would understand. She looked down at her hands, her shoulders still slumped in defeat. People will judge you, they'll insult you. I managed a small, soft smile, just for her. Let them what they thought didn't matter, only she mattered. Meanwhile, downstairs, the party was still going, but the mood had shifted. Bianca and her circle of so-called friends were gathered, their voices loud and sharp with gossip. I told you, he's lost his mind, Bianca declared, her voice dripping with scorn. Imagine, choosing a maid over all of this. Another one chimed in, she must have trapped him somehow. It's the only explanation. A third added, it's obvious she's after his money. Their words were a venomous mix of jealousy and entitlement. And in the corner, unnoticed, a reporter was listening to every single word, his pen flying across his notepad. The reporter didn't waste a second. He typed out the story on his phone and sent it to his editor. The proposed headline was pure clickbait. Millionaire's son rejects socialites for Maid. A smirk spread across the editor's face as he read it. Post it, he replied instantly. This will explode. And he was right. Within minutes, the story, filled with juicy quotes and wild speculation, went viral. The internet lit up with our names. Upstairs, I didn't know any of that yet. I helped Lena to her feet, my hands gentle on her arms. Pack your bag, I said, my voice steady and reassuring. I'm taking you away from this toxic place. She hesitated, her eyes wide with uncertainty. But where will we go? The question hung in the air, a testament to how lost she felt. I gave her the most gentle smile I could muster. Anywhere you feel safe. That's our destination. I went to my own room, a place that suddenly felt foreign and cold. I grabbed a small duffel bag, throwing in only the essentials, a change of clothes, my wallet, my keys. I left behind the designer suits, the expensive watches, the life he had built for me. None of it mattered anymore. When I returned to Lena's room, she was holding her single, small bag, the sum of her life in this house. She was looking around the tiny maid's room, a place of service and solitude. One last time. As I walked in, she was standing by the small window, her back to me. She was staring at her phone, her hand trembling. Caleb, the news, she whispered, her voice barely audible. I pulled out my own phone. It was buzzing nonstop. Dozens of messages, alerts, notifications. I saw the headlines, the articles, the cruel comments. My face hardened. The world was already judging us. Just then, we heard footsteps approaching again. It was my father. He was walking back towards us, but his pace was slower, heavier. He was carrying a small photo frame. It was a picture of me as a child, smiling, carefree. He looked tired, drained, but his eyes were still stubborn. Caleb, think carefully, he said, his voice strained. The whole world is laughing at you right now. I took a step forward, closing the distance between us, my gaze unwavering. Let them laugh, I said, my voice clear and strong. I choose her. His own voice shook with a mixture of anger and pain. You are throwing away everything. Your future, your name, your inheritance. I met his broken gaze without flinching. If everything means living a life like yours, a life of control and empty status, then yes, I am. Lena gasped, covering her mouth with her hand, her eyes shining with unshed tears. My father just stood there, staring at us, his face a canvas of hurt and fury. And then, everything changed. Suddenly, two large security guards appeared in the hallway behind him, their presence menacing and immediate. My father's voice dropped to a dark, chilling whisper. If you won't leave her, I'll make sure she leaves you. He gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod to the guards. That was their signal. They began to walk forward, their target clear, their intentions unmistakable. They were coming for Lena. Caleb's eyes snapped open, a single thought consuming his mind. Nora. A cold dread crept into his heart as he fumbled for his phone, the blank screen glaring back at him. No message, no call, nothing. He threw the covers off, his heart hammering against his ribs. He had to find her. He dressed in a frantic haze and rushed down to the mansion's sprawling kitchen, his eyes scanning every corner, every shadow, hoping to catch a glimpse of her, but she wasn't there. The usual warmth of the kitchen felt cold and empty without her presence. Mrs. Gray, the housekeeper, watched him with kind, knowing eyes. She saw the panic etched on his face, the frantic way he searched. "She didn't come in today, Caleb," she said softly, her voice laced with sympathy. The words hit him like a physical blow. A heavy, suffocating fear rose in his chest, stealing his breath. Nora wouldn't just disappear. Not unless something was terribly wrong. Without another word, he turned and sprinted out of the mansion, the heavy oak door slamming shut behind him. His car tore through the streets, the city a blur outside his window. He drove on instinct, his destination the only place that mattered, Nora's small humble apartment. He parked haphazardly and took the stairs two at a time, his footsteps echoing in the quiet hallway. He reached her door and knocked, softly at first. "Nora, it's me, Caleb, please, open the door." Silence. The silence was a void, swallowing his hope. He knocked again, louder this time, his fist thudding against the wood. "Nora, I know you're in there. Talk to me." Still, nothing but an unnerving quiet from within. Just as despair began to set in, a neighboring door creaked open. A woman with a concerned expression peered out. "Are you looking for Nora?" she asked. Caleb spun around, his eyes wide with a desperate plea. He nodded quickly, unable to form words. "I saw her leave late last night," the neighbor continued, her voice low. "She looked very upset. She was crying." The neighbor's words were like daggers to his heart. Upset, crying, it was his fault. He knew it was. He stepped back from the door, a wave of helplessness washing over him. He pulled out his phone, his fingers trembling as he typed a message. "Please, talk to me. I'm worried sick. Where are you?" He sent it, staring at the screen, praying for a reply that didn't come. Miles away, Nora sat alone on a cold park bench, the city's noise a distant hum. Caleb's message lit up her screen, his words a painful reminder of everything she was running from. She read them over and over, each word twisting the knot in her stomach. A single tear escaped, then another, rolling down her cold cheeks as the memories of the previous night flooded back. Mr. Bennett's voice, booming with disapproval, calling her a nobody. Olivia's cruel, triumphant smile, enjoying her humiliation. A quiet, broken whisper escaped her lips. "I don't belong in his world." She was a weed in their perfectly manicured garden, and they had finally plucked her out. Back at the mansion, Caleb was a storm of fury. He burst into his father's opulent office without knocking, his face a mask of rage. "Where is she?" he demanded, his voice dangerously low. "Where is Nora?" Mr. Bennett looked up from his papers, his expression cold and dismissive, as if swatting away a fly. "The girl she left. It's for the best, Caleb. She was a distraction you didn't need." Caleb's hands clenched into tight fists at his sides, his knuckles turning white. A distraction. Nora was everything but a distraction. "You did this," he seethed, taking a step closer. "You drove her away with your money and your pride." Just then, Olivia swept into the room, a look of fake concern plastered on her face. "Caleb, darling, what's all the shouting about?" She reached out to touch his arm, a gesture of feigned comfort. Caleb recoiled as if her touch burned him. "Don't touch me," he snarled. "Caleb, listen to your father," Olivia said, her voice dripping with condescension. "That girl, she's not like us. She never could be. That was it, the final straw. Stay out of this, Olivia." Caleb snapped, his voice echoing in the large office. Her face crumpled into an expression of theatrical offense, and she stormed out. Caleb turned back to his father, his eyes burning with a fiery resolve. "You think you can control everything with your power and your influence," he said, his voice shaking with raw emotion. "But you can't control my heart." With one last, defiant look, Caleb spun on his heel and walked out, leaving his father sitting alone in his empire of ice. He was done playing their games. He got back in his car, his mission clear. He would find her. He would find Nora, and he would never let her go again. He drove through the city like a man possessed, a desperate search that felt like a race against time. He checked every park, every bus stop, every little cafe he could think of. He called her name into the bustling crowds, his voice hoarse and raw. Nothing. It was like she had vanished from the face of the earth. Hours passed, and the sun began to dip below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. Exhaustion was setting in, but he couldn't stop. He wouldn't stop. Then, a memory sparked in his mind. A conversation they'd had weeks ago, about a peaceful lakeside she loved, a place she went to think. It was a long shot, but it was all he had left. He drove to the lake, the last glimmers of hope fueling him. The air was cool and still by the water, the setting sun casting long shadows across the path. He walked along the shoreline, his heart heavy with a mixture of hope and dread. His steps were slow, tired, and then, he saw her, a lone figure, sitting on a bench by the water's edge. silhouetted against the fading light. It was Nora. For a moment, Caleb froze, an overwhelming wave of relief washing over him, so powerful it nearly brought him to his knees. He had found her. She was safe. He started walking towards her, his heart pounding a frantic rhythm. She must have sensed him because she slowly turned her head, and then, their eyes met across the distance. In that single, shared glance, 1,000 unspoken words passed between them, all the pain, all the love, all the longing, and all the fear. The world around them seemed to fall away, leaving just the two of them, suspended in that one, heart-stopping moment. Nora sat by the shimmering lake, her gaze lost in the gentle ripples on the water's surface. Her eyes were tired and swollen, a testament to the storm of tears she had cried. A soft rustle of leaves and the snap of a twig broke the silence. She heard footsteps approaching from behind and turned her head slowly, her body tense. It was Caleb. He stood there, his chest heaving as if he'd been running for miles. The moment his eyes landed on her, a wave of profound relief washed over his face, softening his anxious features. He started walking toward her, his steps deliberate and slow, as if afraid any sudden movement might spook her and make her flee. Nora, uncertain and still nursing her wounded heart, looked away, her eyes returning to the endless expanse of the lake. Caleb came to a stop beside her and then lowered himself to sit, careful to leave a respectful, gentle space between them. The wind sighed, a soft whisper that filled the quiet gap. Finally, Caleb broke the silence, his voice barely more than a whisper, laced with hurt. "Why didn't you tell me you were hurting?" Nora kept her focus on the distant horizon, her voice small and fragile when she answered. "Your father hates me," she said flatly. "Olivia humiliated me." She finally turned to him, her expression a mix of sorrow and resignation. "I don't fit in your world, Caleb." Caleb shook his head, a firm, resolute movement. "My world doesn't matter without you." Nora's lower lip trembled. A single tear escaped and traced a path down her cheek. "You deserve someone from your class," she managed to say, her voice cracking. Caleb's hand reached for hers. She flinched, hesitating for a heartbeat, but then let her fingers rest against his. She didn't pull away. "I deserve love," he said, his voice soft and full of conviction. "And you're the one I love." At his words, a fresh wave of tears welled in Nora's eyes. She opened her mouth to speak, but no sound came out, just a choked sob. Caleb's touch was impossibly gentle as he reached up and wiped the tear from her cheek with his thumb. "Please don't disappear again," he whispered, his plea hanging in the air between them. Nora finally lifted her gaze to meet his in the depths of his eyes. She saw no pity, no deception, only raw, unvarnished honesty. "I was scared," she admitted, the confession a heavy weight lifted from her chest. Caleb nodded in understanding. "I'm scared too. Scared of losing you." Nora drew a shaky, deep breath, gathering her courage. "Your father will never accept me." Caleb's grip on her hand tightened, a silent promise of his strength. "Then I'll stand against him." Nora's eyes widened in shock. "You'd fight your own father?" He didn't hesitate for a second. "For you, always," he said, his voice unwavering. A warmth spread through Nora's chest, melting the ice that had formed around her heart. Caleb leaned in a little closer, his presence a comforting shield. "Can I hug you?" he asked, his voice gentle, giving her the choice. Nora could only manage a small, shaky nod. In the next moment, Caleb pulled her into his arms, enveloping her in a strong, secure embrace. She let go of all the tension, melting against his chest, her head finding a home in the crook of his neck. They stayed like that, two souls clinging to each other as the sun began its slow descent, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink. As the last sliver of sunlight vanished, Caleb whispered into her hair, "Let's face everything together." Nora nodded slowly against his shoulder. "Okay, together." A genuine smile, the first one he'd worn all day, broke across Caleb's face. They walked back to his car, their hands intertwined. Nora's nerves were a jumble, a flutter of anxiety in her stomach, but she fought to keep her composure, to stay strong for him, for them. Caleb sensed her unease and gave her hand a soft, reassuring squeeze. "I'm right here," he murmured, his voice a balm to her frayed spirit. When they reached the towering iron gates of the Bennett mansion, Nora faltered, her steps slowing to a halt. The familiar sight filled her with a fresh wave of dread. Caleb, ever the gentleman, walked around to her side and opened her car door. She stepped out onto the gravel driveway, her movements slow and deliberate. From the windows and doorways, the staff watched their arrival, their eyes wide with disbelief and curiosity. Whispers erupted, spreading through the grand house like wildfire. Caleb paid them no mind. He kept Nora tucked close to his side, a protective arm around her as they walked with purpose toward the one place Nora never wanted to see again. Mr. Bennett's office. With every step, Nora's heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat in her ears. Caleb didn't pause. He raised his hand and knocked firmly on the heavy oak door. A moment later, the door swung open. Mr. Bennett stood there, his face a mask of stern disapproval. His eyes flickered from his son to the woman standing beside him, and he froze. His expression darkened into a thunderous scowl. "Why is she here?" he growled, his voice low and menacing. Caleb stood taller, his spine straight and unyielding. "Because she belongs with me." Mr. Bennet's frown deepened, carving harsh lines into his face. "You're throwing away your future for this folly." Caleb took a defiant step forward, shielding Nora slightly with his body. "No, I'm choosing my future." Mr. Bennet let out a short, derisive laugh. "She's a maid, a nobody." The words were like daggers, and Nora felt her heart shatter into a million pieces. In an instant, Caleb's hand found hers again, his grip fierce and grounding. "She's the woman I love," he declared, his voice ringing with authority, loud enough for anyone nearby to hear. Rage contorted Mr. Bennet's features. His face turned a dangerous shade of red. "If you choose to walk this path, you're on your own. You'll receive nothing from me." Caleb didn't even blink. He met his father's furious gaze without an ounce of fear. "Then I'll build my own path." With her, Nora gasped softly, her breath catching in her throat at his sheer, unwavering courage. He was willing to give up everything for her. Mr. Bennet, defeated and seething, turned his back on them in a gesture of final, angry dismissal. Caleb turned to Nora, the hardness in his expression dissolving into a soft, loving smile. "Let's leave," he whispered. Nora looked into his eyes, seeing her past, her present, and her future all reflected there. She nodded, her trust in him absolute and complete. Hand in hand, they walked out of the office, out of the mansion, and into the cool evening air. Once they were outside, away from the oppressive weight of his father's world, Caleb turned to her. "This is our beginning," he whispered, his voice filled with hope and promise. A smile broke through Nora's tears, a real, radiant smile. She squeezed his hand, ready for whatever came next. As long as they were together, they were ready for their new life.